For decades, surfers have traveled the world in search of the perfect wave. Now, for the first time in history, we may actually be on the verge of creating that perfect wave, thanks to the South Bay chapter of the Surfrider Foundation and Chevron USA. It will not be the first surfing beach to have been created by man. Engineering projects that were directed towards other goals, such as the construction of piers and jetties, have created some fine breaks, quite by accident. But never before has a project been undertaken whose basic purpose was to create ocean surf. Applying the kind of expertise that has traditionally been lavished on industry, the designers of the El Segundo Reef hope to restore some portion of what has been lost through coastal development and to preserve one of the great pleasures the beaches of the world afford us. Some see it as the beginning of a new chapter in environmental engineering, a whole new way of thinking about the oceans and how we ought to treat them. The winter of 1983 marked one of the strongest El Niño events in the last century. Violent winter storms caused widespread damage throughout Southern California, but its brunt was felt along the coast where heavy surf, magnified by unusually high tides, pounded oceanfront communities with waves up to 15 feet. The unrelenting surf battered the coast for weeks. When it was all over, the waves had caused extensive erosion along the coast and left Chevron's El Segundo marine terminal and pipelines without a protective beach. In response to the erosion, Chevron proposed installing a 900-foot rock jetty with a renourishment project to fill the area surrounding the jetty with approximately 620,000 cubic feet of sand. Local surfers hoped that the installation of the jetty would create a new break, and at first it appeared they'd gotten their wish, but later developments proved otherwise. Surfing photographer Mike Balzer observed the construction of the jetty and witnessed the early reaction of the surfing community.
I started shooting it right when they started constructing the jetty, when they first started putting the initial rocks out, and then they put a crane up on those rocks. And then the crane would bring in more rocks in front of it and slowly worked its way out. So I did start shooting it when they started to construct that. And at the same time, they were bringing sand onto the beach. Some of the sand came from the excavation over at Hyperion, and they put it on conveyor belts and ended up conveyor belting it down to the area. And then bulldozers pushed it out from where the bike path was, pushed it westward or towards the ocean, and made a longer beach. After 1984, once the jetty was built, a lot of people in this area had a lot of high hopes that it would actually create some sort of a surf spot. The biggest standout guys from this area at the time would have been Ted Robinson, Nick Christensen, Kelly Gibson, and Chris Frohoff. And they were beginning to surf that area quite a bit in an area just north of the jetty, because it was away from the main scene where everyone could drive into the parking lot in El Porto and see the good waves. They were heading to this spot and no one really knew about it. It was kind of their own little secret spot.
In the early 1980s, Ted, Nick, Kelly, and Chris were selected to be on the National Scholastic Surfing Association's national team. The experience of competing on an international level gave them the confidence to tackle the expert-only waves the new jetty created.
I remember the first day that we could surf it, me and Ted surfed it, and we liked to claim we were the first guys out there. When it was first put in, it was a little bit longer, probably about 100 yards longer.
I don't think Kelly's accurate when he said he surfed it first. I thought I was out there about 2 weeks before he went out. No, but it was, I think that the best thing about that jetty is that it was another surf spot.
Ted Robinson, they kind of started calling it Hammerland because of how beat up they would get, how hard the wave broke in really shallow water. And they basically, every time they'd go out, they'd say they just got hammered when they were out there. We shot really for the first time at the El Segundo jetty, and it was Ted Robinson, Chris Frohoff, and kind of a cast of local guys. So I was just jumping up and down going, Ted, come on, get down there. You know, I wanted to get him out in the water as soon as possible to try to get, you know, the really good light. Well, you know, I just wanted him out in the water, and I didn't really have a care about how hard it was to paddle out or anything like that.
You know, a lot of people get the wrong perspective of that place because it's maybe 1 in 10 or 15 waves that are like that. So, you know, it's made out to be a premier surf spot, and it really isn't. I mean, it has its days maybe 2-3 times a year, 4 times, and it's maybe only 1 out of every 15 waves that are good like that. So it's kind of a fake in that sense. The quality of the waves have been affected in a negative way. And as far as I'm concerned, back before that jetty was put in, it used to be better.
What happened was, you know, just storm surf came in and ended up just taking apart the jetty. The rocks ended up getting shifted around, and it shortened the jetty by, it looks like it's probably at least cut in half from what it originally was. It's not what it was anymore. You can't really surf the right, and the left on the north side is a real random wave. It breaks on the best year maybe 3 to 5 times a year.
The new wave broke 3 to 5 times a year, and only the most experienced surfers could ride it. The damage from the project was extreme. What was lost for the average surfer was a half-mile stretch of beach that once had consistently fine waves all year long. The Surfrider Foundation is a grassroots environmental organization dedicated to the protection and enhancement of the world's waves and beaches. Members are powerful spokespeople and caretakers of the ocean environment. Chris Jones, Tom Marcelino, and Rick Page are the driving force of the South Bay chapter.
Beach erosion was a problem for Chevron and the refinery here right in El Segundo. The jetty that exists now was built to protect the beach and prevent beach erosion. Unfortunately, one of the side effects was it had a detrimental effect on the existing surf there. By putting the jetty there, they've managed to stop what sand flow there is, thicken the beach. Unfortunately, by doing that, you change the wave breaks over the current reef and the sandbars that are normally built up by storm work and wave action over time. So wherever there's a jetty, you end up getting one little peak maybe out of it, but you destroy the natural beach break that normally would exist there. The South Bay chapter of Surfrider initiated some discussions with Chevron to determine what could be done to address the fact that the jetty had diminished surf in the area.
I started the Surfrider Foundation in 1984. One of the very first things I did in getting that organization off the ground was become a team, create a team of guys who I thought knew a lot about surfing. Lance Carson, Chris Blakely, Dan Young, and most importantly, Tom Pratte. Tom Pratte was the first professional environmentalist who was also a surfer.
Tom Pratte had done a survey to determine the effects that Chevron's jetty had had on the area. He was looking for local surfers that had anecdotal experience, and he was basically putting together his report on the effect of the jetty on surf in that area, which later was completed and presented to the California Coastal Commission.
Ten years ago, I was before this commission when the surfing community secured a condition regarding this Chevron project at El Segundo that would provide mitigation if surfing conditions were adversely impacted by the project. At the time Chevron agreed to this permit condition, their experts predicted that the surfing conditions would be as good or better than the existing conditions. They agreed to the condition requiring the surf monitoring and the potential mitigation. It's been found, it's documented that there have been adverse impacts that are significant to surfing that were attributable to this project.
The representative surfing community, with which I have a lot of personal respect, and because I've got to know a lot of them over the last number of years, would have you believe that the only acceptable mitigation is some kind of replacement of the resource. They view Chevron as solely responsible for this issue and have been unwilling to accept suggestions that there are a lot of other issues at play here. That problem has been compounded by the fact that we've had a lot of different personalities change during the course of the discussion over the last 7 years. My concern is that they want to use this as an example in, I think, an inappropriate way.
It is the feeling of the Surfrider Foundation and the people of the surfers of the community that the only true mitigation is restoration of the surf. We are not anti-business. We are pro-Chevron. We think Chevron has done an outstanding job to this date, but we feel much more is needed. We must have restoration of the wave. The technology is here.
Thank you, Chairman. It's as if I were driving my car, I get hit by another driver, and I make my claim against the other driver, and they go, I'm not going to give you your car, and I'm not going to give you money back to buy another car. I'm going to give you this book that says best cars to get hit by. And then you can just keep on waiting till you get hit by the right car, and then that car has to replace it.
And mitigation to do studies and to remove a rock or two certainly doesn't replace beaches and certainly doesn't replace surfing opportunities that have been lost. What I'm hearing the Surfrider say is, hey, we've lost surfing conditions and beach, big bad developer. We don't want studies. Studies doesn't give us more surfing area. We want surfing area.
I think the locals who surf here realized that, and they had known for many years that the surf had changed and was diminished because of the construction of the jetty. Rick Page is our Chevron liaison, and at that time he joined with Tom Pratte and really took the lead and hammered home Surfrider's fervent desire to address this issue. This is our backyard. This is a piece of the coast that we're responsible for, and it's not something we were going to let go by.
Now the key player in the whole negotiation, the whole game has been Tom Pratte. Tom Pratte was a surfer from Inglewood area, and Tom was the original founder of the Surfrider Foundation. He's probably the first surf eco-warrior. And when this project came out, Tom had been put into the permit that if the surf were damaged, there'd be some restoration involved, or mitigation was the exact term.
Through the efforts of Surfrider, the Chevron organization was forced to come up with money for the mitigation of the surf zone.
The Reef came about, we were trying to decide what is appropriate mitigation. Mitigation means replacement or repairing of something that has been destroyed. The Reef technology can accomplish two things. Number one, we have a sand erosion problem in the South Bay. These are not natural beaches. A surfing reef is basically an underwater breakwater. Therefore, we can maybe solve two problems. We can create waves and protect the beach, because if we don't protect the beach, we're going to have to do these beach nourishment projects anyway. So this may be killing two birds with one stone and everybody's happy. It might be a win-win situation here. We settled on Dave Skelly Engineering. The reason we settled on Dave, one is he was very enthusiastic about the project. Most important is that Dave addressed the concern that was foremost in my mind. Would building this reef destroy something that the El Segundo locals valued? And that was the thrust of his whole project. Here's what we can do without hurting something else.
Skelly Engineering was selected by the Surfrider Foundation to design, engineer, and permit the first artificial surfing reef. It's part of a condition of compliance put on the Chevron Corporation for some of the work they did back in 1982 and 83 right here on this beach. And my company specializes just in coastal projects such as harbors, marinas, seawalls, jetties, groins, and breakwaters. That's what this project is. It's actually a submerged breakwater. This project is kind of the dream of every surfer. I know if somebody that's been surfing for 30 years, I myself have thought a lot about this, and I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to do this. We've come up with a real simple design, and we basically just want to prove the concept. We want to prove that we can go out there and make waves break in such a way that they're more surfable. And I think that, in the future we'll probably see more exotic type projects, but this is the first step, and this is a big step too for surfing in general.
Many surfers have dreamed of building a reef to create a perfect wave. One such surfer was the late great Hoppy Schwartz, the father of organized surfing. Hoppy's best friend, photographer Leroy Granis, documented the building of this reef, perhaps the first attempt to create surfable waves by modifying the ocean floor.
The attempt to build the reef took place in April of '71, and it was about 2 blocks north of the Redondo breakwater and approximately 100 yards off the beach. The original idea was to funnel surf over this reef to make it break in a perfect shape and spread out and have a good shoulder on it. Phil and Merlin Olson, a couple of Ram football players, who in the off season had a business going they called Erosion Control West, which beefed up properties along the ocean front that were threatened by high tides and storm surf and that kind of thing. This is Phil Olson with the bags. What they did was take this pump, suck sand off of the bottom, and blow it into these bags here until they got filled up. Hop's idea was to build a V-shaped reef up off the bottom of the sand with these sandbags. The idea was real good. The only problem was that after it got built, with the constant wave action, it finally settled clear into the sand and disappeared.
Although no waves ever broke on Hoppy's Reef, the original concept was ahead of its time.
One of the myths about this project is that it's really a complex engineering problem. The reality is, though, that the environment out there is so complex and ever-changing that the engineering is quite simple. The biggest hurdle for this project is actually getting permission to do it, and that's the permitting phase. I have to deal with agencies on the city level, the state level, and the federal level, which makes it rather a lot of hoops to jump through. We know from previous studies this amount of material we needed to put out there, and we know the amount of money, so that kind of dictated the design. And what I drew on is from some using geotextile fabrics, and it's an application that's been used in other environments, primarily river environments. So what I did is I've taken existing technology and applied it in a unique way. So my concept is to put out gigantic sandbags, and each bag weighs about 12 to 14 tons. That's a rather large bag. Geotextile bags have been used on the Mississippi River to control bank erosion. They've also been used on the East Coast for coastal structures such as groins and dikes for dredge spoils containment. The interesting thing is that these bags will last probably at least 2 decades and possibly longer. Construction in the surf zone is really difficult, and out here at El Segundo we have a 10-foot tide range, a mobile bottom, and waves that come from different directions. The formation that we're placing these bags in is a chevron-shaped formation, or V-shaped, and hopefully that'll create a good right break and a good left break. Well, because we're going to put a bump out there, we're hoping to make a plunging wave, kind of a wave with a little bit of attitude. Something that's a little different than you see out here, more of the gentle rolling wave. Again, the wave field is so complex here, it's going to be hard to make any kind of certain wave because the waves change, the wave height, the wave period, and the wave direction changes on a daily basis. But we are locating the reef in deeper water so that nobody can hit it. So waves that break directly on the reef will probably be 6 to 8 foot in height. Now, in the lee of the reef, a sandbar will form and smaller breakers will break on that sandbar. Probably more of a collapsing wave or a spilling wave instead of the classic plunging wave like you see at, say, the Bonsai Pipeline.
One of the problems I had with this reef is I'm not an El Segundo local. That's not my break. And we had to talk extensively to the El Segundo people because it's their backyard and not ours. But as soon as the South Bay chapter was involved, I felt that my duty was to represent the El Segundo people and no one else.
The last thing I would want to do is interrupt any kind of existing surf spot. The influence of this reef is going to be limited to maybe 100 to 200 feet on either side of it in the max. This is based on several things. It's based on experience, it's based on scientific evidence, it's based on what we know about this shoreline. There really is a science to making surf spots.
We did some real extensive talking both before and after this agreement was made. with the El Segundo locals. After we made the agreement with Chevron, I still went back to Tyler Hezekian, Kurt Schaefer, some of the people who are there, who've been there all their lives, to find out if we were going to shove something down their throat they didn't want. It's very important that they get what they want, or don't do anything if that's what they wish.
In El Segundo we have the jetty and we have the pipe. One of my major concerns is location and how it would affect the spots surrounding where the reef would be put. I think there's a great future for surfing reefs. I think the big companies getting behind something like that would be great, as long as the surfers agreed with it.
Being the first project of its kind, there's a lot of people watching this, and I think we have to kind of understand what this whole project is about so we can measure the success. I think that in a sense this project's already successful because we've established a surf break as a valuable resource, and we're partnering with a corporation to actually recreate a surf break. You know, we have to be realistic. We're not in Hawaii, we're not in an area that has great waves in the first place. El Segundo has some good surfing spots, but in general, it's not a world-class surfing area. So what we're going to try to do is basically prove the concept that we can go out there and create a surfable wave.
I believe that any kind of reefs that they can do, there's so much untapped surf that would be really good.
Do I think that it'd be a good idea to build more reefs? Yes, I do. Do I think that this one's a great opportunity? No question.
The fact that they're going to build an artificial reef for surfing, I think it could only help. I'm excited about it. It's a great idea. I would like to be the first one out there to go try it out when it's built. You know, it's a piece of history.
Surfing is behind the times a little bit. You look at sports like skiing, and we can go out and make a ski slope here and there, and other sports where they can actually fill the need. But here in Southern California, we have many, many more surfers than we have room for. And so I see a big future for creating surf spots. Ultimately, I see us taking large objects and mooring them out in the surf zone and using those objects to create surf breaks. Just envision something like a skateboard park where they go out and mold the land to how they want to skate. We can go out and mold the land and then cast it, bring that structure out, moor it in the surf zone, and create any kind of breaker that we want. It's the future. People have to remember that this is the start of the 21st century of surfing, you know, not the end. This is just the first step in many steps on creating good surf spots for the future.
I know a lot of these guys won't know what finally placed that reef there, but there's certain people that probably, if anything, should be remembered. Tom Pratte's probably the main person.
Tom basically held a oil company accountable for the destruction of a wave.
Man was definitely ahead of his time, was a visionary. The whole project really is because of his foresight.
Tom passed away of cancer shortly before this agreement was made. He did know that we were close and that we probably would wrap it up shortly. He got prostate cancer and passed away 6 months after being diagnosed. God bless him, we'll miss him. It's Tom's fight. We could all pass a lot of credit around, but it's Tom. It's Tom's Reef, period.
If we as surfers want to have any kind of significant say in what's going on in the beaches, we're going to have some tangible victories. We're going to have to say, we started something here and we're going to defend it.
Chevron is a large corporation, and I feel personally that there are probably other companies that, even though we had fought them tooth and nail for years, they may not have acquiesced. And so I think it's a feather in Chevron's cap that I know some of their corny commercials talk about, you know, who cares, people do and Chevron does, but they did. They came through in this case, and I think they were wary at first, but I think they realized what had happened, and when the facts were presented, the right decision was made. So I applaud their efforts on this too.
The important thing here is not the reef, though. Please don't think that the reef is the issue. It's not. The issue is that surfing breaks will no longer be destroyed because the Coastal Commission has on record that surfing habitat, is their wording, is a resource worthy of protection, like a tideland, like a beach, and that is the key to the whole thing, and the reef is frosting on the cake. It's something that we can do. It's going to be the first step in surfing reef technology, and it ought to be fun to see what happens.
Whether the crest of the perfect wave will ever rise from the waters off El Segundo remains to be seen. What is more significant, perhaps, is the change in thinking the project represents. The Pratte's Reef project could pave the way for other kinds of coastal restoration. It could lead to an era in which coastal development is more responsible to the diverse communities who use and appreciate the ocean. As an alternative to unsightly jetties and groins, underwater reefs could be used to preserve sand beaches. Man-made reefs could also serve as protective habitat for sea life. In short, the world's engineers, private and public, could begin to apply their skills to the preservation and restoration of precious ocean resources rather than to their destruction. This wave, comprised not of salt water but of new ideas, might be more significant in the long run than the surfer's perfect wave.